Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. The season is over. It all comes down to this. Brian is right. Dre is wrong. The finals over. We're definitely going to talk that. But welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez. With me, as always, is our producer, co-host, voice of God, Brian Foster. You can find me on Twitter as Nerd Numbers. You can find Brian on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Brian, say hey, and we got a bunch to go over.
Yeah, what's going on, Dre? Another NBA season is over. It was a great season, of course, for me, but for everyone else as well. We'll talk about that later. But now it's time for the real NBA season, Dre, the off season, and we'll talk about the finals today. But we'll have the draft is coming up next week too, so still a lot going on.
So a few things. So yeah, we're definitely going to talk the NBA Finals. I mean, that's going to hog most of the discussion. I've got some thoughts on Kyrie Irving that we definitely got to get out there. For those of you that don't know, if you're just tuning in for the first time, Brian Foster is a huge Golden State Warriors fan. So of course, we're going to have a lot to discuss there. I'm going to hog the mic first, Brian, to give kind of a PSA to bloggers, writers, amateur bloggers and writers out there. That's what the quality I'm in. What I was going to say is, so last week's show, make this promise. I say I'm going to try and get a piece out every Monday and announce when the show is going live. For fans of the show, you'll notice neither of those things happened. Here's the advice. When you have an idea for a piece and you start doing research, it's very tempting to kind of like pre-write the piece and then kind of fill in the gaps with the research. And I'm not saying that's the wrong way to do things if you have an infinite amount of time or a lot of time. I started doing that in a piece on Kyrie Irving. I'm in the process of writing it. It may never come out because we're going to discuss it on this week's show, and then I may let it go by the wayside if I consider our discussion, Brian, good enough. But essentially, if you overthink your piece ahead of time, if I had just started doing the research and then kind of said, oh, here's a good stopping point, this is easily enough for a post. And there were several of those. So that's the issue. I have a Kyrie Irving piece that I intended to release close to Monday, did not happen. And then it turns out after doing all the research, it might just be one piece. It's big enough for like 3 pieces. So advice to writers, like if you're trying to put yourself on a deadline to just get something out, kind of start with the research. If you find a story in that research, then make that a piece and release. And then it's always easy to make multi-part pieces, follow up, track back, etc. I've been doing this for years and it's an amateur mistake. After the fact, I looked at it, we came up on Wednesday, Brian. I was like, geez, didn't get anything out when I intended to. But mistakes can happen to everybody who does this, but that's my kind of PSA for writers.
Mistakes were made. War and Peace starring Kyrie Irving. Yeah, I'd read that, Dre.
So the first, obviously we're going to discuss the NBA Finals. I'm not going to put this on the script, Brian. You can consider this the podcast equivalent of a subtweet. Not even really a subtweet, but it's subtweeting in the sense that like a subtweet is when you talk about someone, but you don't make it very overt that you're talking about them. But I'm going to add a new segment to the show, Brian, that will never make a script, will never make the write-up, but I'm going to call it Neil Payne is a fucking idiot. To put the elephant in the room, Neil Payne is one of the few people over the course of my long blogging career that I just cannot stand. There are many people I disagree with. I'm very argumentative on Twitter, as people know, which I find amusing because like in real life, I'm the dorky analytics guy. And then on the internet with basketball analytics, I'm outspoken, which is nuts to me. But Neil Payne released an article after the end of this finals, Brian, which says, the Warriors are in the greatest of all time debate, but they blew their chance to end it. His argument being if they'd gone 16-0, boom, that just without a doubt proves it. But because they went 16-1, they're not. And so the reason this is just a stupid freaking comment, Brian, is a few things. One, that is the highest win percentage in NBA playoffs history. Because don't forget, even the 76ers who only went 4-5-4, and even the Lakers, who were the last team to only miss sweeping all of their rounds by one game, well, they only had, I believe, a best of 3 or best of 5 round 1. So this is the first team in the history of the NBA to have, I believe, a 94% win percentage in the playoffs. They are also, as we know from last season, the highest win percentage in the regular season. It is ludicrous to assume. It is ludicrous if you're going to try and use the argument that one game distinguishes them from the greatest of all time when those other accolades. It's freaking ridiculous because if that is the litmus test you're using, which I'm not going to agree with, but if you were going to use the win percentage in the playoffs as the litmus test, I'm going to say it's just stupid reasoning, especially how it turned out. Because, it's kind of like if there were other teams, right? If, for instance, the New England Patriots had gone 15-1 that season and then won the Super Bowl, And you go, well, they have more wins than whatever year the Dolphins that went undefeated were, but their percentage is lower. Fine. But you cannot say that about the Warriors. The Warriors have the greatest win percentage now in regular season and playoff history. They have 2 titles in 3 years. They've had back-to-back MVPs in Steph Curry. They have 2 different finals MVPs. It is ludicrous not to assume this is the greatest team of ever, if those are the arguments you're going to make.
Yeah, this is pretty funny. So I don't remember the Warriors' exact regular season record, but let's just say it's 70-12 for the simplicity of math. Like, you're gonna say that if they go 86-12 versus 85-13 or whatever, that 1 game difference over that big of a sample size decides if they're the best or not. Man, talk about small sample size theater. That's just ridiculous.
Well, I had this argument before when LeBron James won last season, won the title. And there were people finally saying, this game cements LeBron James as the greatest of all time or whatever, or puts him in the discussion, however you want to say it. It's like he's played, at this point, he's got the record for most points scored in the playoffs. I forget. He has played hundreds of playoff games, over 1,000 regular season games, right? Easily. I'm trying to think. Again, our reverse. I'm going to switch out my computer at some point, but my Surface Pro takes for freaking ever to search. And again, another amateurish mistake. If you are someone that does research, a podcast, whatever, and you have a tool that sucks, just suck it up and get a new one or replace it out. Yeah, he's played over 1,000 regular season games. He has played... Wow, how many?
And while you're looking that up, I'll just step in. I was dead wrong about the Warriors' record. They only won 67 games this year, not 70. But the point remains, like, I'm sorry. So maybe if he's going to make an argument that's something like, well, that's not how good the team really is, but this is what it would take to put conventional wisdom over the top. But even that's a weird argument to me. I don't care about catering to conventional wisdom, and I don't think he made that distinction enough in the article. I think he just fell into small sample size trap.
But it's the Billy Bean, my shit don't work in the playoffs, because I've mentioned this kind of before, where there was a playoffs where the I think it was like 1983 or 1984, the 76ers. I'll try and look up NBA final. But so what happened is this was the most lopsided NBA playoffs ever, where the 4-5-4 76ers just crushed everybody en route to a title, including crushing. They swept the Showtime Lakers, right? Digging this into Magic again. If you're going to talk about sweeping people in the if you're going to talk about sweeping current teams in the finals, it's really important that you actually, swept teams in your own era, which they never did. And in fact, even more important, probably a good thing to not have been swept, which did happen. All right. So I forget the year because the article I'm coming up on is not finding it, but they win the title, and it's the most lopsided finals or lopsided playoffs ever. And then the next season, it's I believe it's a 4-3 best of 7 between the Lakers and the Boston Celtics. One of those barn burners. And so 1983. Let's see. Hold up. Where is this? Okay.
Just kidding. That's what they would do if it was a instant replay review.
In 1983, the Los Angeles Lakers got blown out 0-4 to the 76ers. Next season, 2 of the greatest franchises ever, the Los Angeles Lakers, go 3-4 and lose to the Boston Celtics. Now, here's the argument. Are you going to look and say the Celtics played one of the greatest teams ever with two MVP players to a best of 7? What argument are you going to use? Who's the best ever? The team that, routed that, went 4-0 against arguably weaker competition. That's something that is a little annoying about all of this freaking super team talk, Brian. I'm just going to be all over the place with talking today, but I've been hating a lot of the super team talk. And the argument I'll give against it is, look at how bad the rest of the league was during that offseason. In the offseason where Kevin Durant went to the Warriors, I might at one point write this piece too. Again, odds are going down, so we're talking about it, about revisionist history. We argued the Clay versus Kevin Love trade being wrong at the time. Now, the important elephant in the room is you can only claim that move was right for the Warriors if you believe they saw Kevin Because essentially what happened is a lot of what Kevin Love, too many Kevins. A lot of what Kevin Love would have been doing on the Warriors was redundant with Draymond Green. And while Klay Thompson's contract is probably overpriced with what we'd like to pay him, his market value was fine. And because they structured it in a way that was intelligent going, we know there is a new CBA coming into play. So we are going to pay you as if you are close to a max deal player on the old CBA. But when the CBA goes up, you're not going to get a percentage boost. Whereas if they had signed Kevin Love, odds are he would have signed a max-ish deal, which would be a percentage of cap, which means when the CBA went up in terms of how much you were allowed to pay players with the salary cap, Kevin Love's contract would have gone up as well. And then they wouldn't have been able to attract a big free agent like Kevin Durant. So essentially my point is, even if we thought that move was wrong because they missed out on getting one of the greatest players. Now, again, if you think they thought Draymond Green was going to be what he was, I don't think they do. So that's why we still don't give him full credit. But they at least were smart enough to do something that no teams or very few teams do, in my opinion, which is to actually view the landscape of your salary cap of upcoming free agents. And we saw teams in this offseason just go nuts and waste money. And one of my favorite examples is everybody was thinking Kevin Durant was going to go back to OKC. I believe even Golden State was in that boat, right? They pitched him just like everybody pitches every major big free agency, big name in free agency, but didn't think they were going to get him. Same happened with Andre Iguodala, by the way. So maybe a lot of the Warriors' success isn't light years ahead. It's luck. Anyway, so but what happened is the Los Angeles Clippers are courting Kevin Durant as well. And they think, he says, you gave a good pitch, there's a good shot. And before he has made his decision, they give $10 million to Austin Rivers. So teams were really, really stupid with how they spent money. So when I get annoyed at like the super team complaint, I'm like, if you want to be mad, there are lots of people to be mad at. You can be mad at OKC, for instance. You can be mad at Clay Bennett moving the Warriors out of a good market into a small market, then as a result, cutting roster space because he didn't have money because he was in a small market, and as a result, Kevin Durant leaving because they couldn't get him a title. You could arguably be mad at Mike Brown. This is one of the biggest butterfly effect-ish things ever, Brian. So Arturo has argued that in 2010, Mike Brown coached the Cleveland Cavaliers incorrectly in the playoffs, which is why they lost to the Boston Celtics. A big thing he did is he gave Shaquille O'Neal too many minutes when they had Anderson Varejao, so he played a weaker lineup that was mismatched against the Celtics. As a result, the Cavaliers missed arguably their best chance to win a title. I believe they were the best team in the league according to normal SRS, but then they played a weaker rotation in the playoffs and don't make the finals. LeBron James says, this team is not good for me making the finals. Hop ship to Miami. Because he goes to Miami, Miami keeps OKC from winning their first title because arguably OKC was a slightly better team by SRS, although, of course, we've seen playoff LeBron James. So OKC might have won a title against whoever else came out of the East if Miami doesn't make it. And then if that happens, then maybe Kevin Durant doesn't leave. So maybe you can be mad at Mike Brown. But you should certainly be mad at the rest of the teams in the NBA who have had so many advantages. The Celtics have so many assets, so many picks, so many good players that they just need to make one decent move, and they've been sitting on their hands for like 2 seasons now. And so it really irks me where if you want to be mad at the Warriors for parity in the league, fine, even though that's always been the case, right? But you should be infuriated with the rest of the league being freaking horrible as heck. The freaking Los Angeles Clippers have wasted so much money. Doc Rivers alone has cost the Clippers from being a competitive super team with the Warriors to being a good team that usually, leaves the playoffs in the second round.
Yeah, well, here's the thing that we always like to say about the super teams, and I think a lot of NBA players are starting to say this too, notably Draymond Green this year defending Kevin Durant, is for some reason when the players themselves try to form super teams, everyone gets mad. But when they get traded into a super team or drafted into a super team, that's okay. Like that, you're not allowed to decide your own destiny. That's the part that's always been weird.
The one of our favorite subjects is like behavioral psychology and all sorts of fun stuff about irrationality. So, for instance, a common one is like loss aversion, where I just have to change how I phrase it. I go, you could win $10. If I phrase it that way, much more likely to do it than if I say you could lose $1, which is hilarious. And, the Kevin Garnett Boston Celtics were a super team that arguably Kevin Garnett orchestrated, but it is viewed more as the Celtics being savvy and making the trade than Kevin Garnett forcing his way into the team, because all that happened is they tried to trade for him and he said, no, I'm not going to sign an extension with you with the team you currently have. Then they got Ray Allen and he said, sure, I'll go. That is not really much different than LeBron James saying, Wade is resigning and Bosh is going to Miami, okay, I'll go. It's very similar, but how we view who was in control there. And the same thing happened with Durant, because Durant's flying over to lots of different teams because lots of different teams think they have a shot at him. Suddenly we are mad. And so, yeah, to your exact point, there are various super teams we're fine with. The LeBron super team and Kevin Durant, we've been mad at, and we've talked the racial undertones in the NBA before. There is something very unsettling and very true about the fact that fans seem to be upset when a black millionaire makes a decision about their own destiny, but they do not have the same anger and annoyance that rich old white guy controls their own destiny.
Or controls someone else's destiny, even.
Or, yeah, even worse, controls someone else's destiny,
Yeah.
right? You know, the fact that after all of this, it's going to be bizarre, right? I don't think the amount of hatred towards LeBron James and Dan Gilbert is ever going to be matched, meaning I think LeBron James in NBA history is always going to have more talking points, more people angry about him than were about Dan Gilbert, when honestly, if you were going to be mad at LeBron James's press conference, which I have absolute, he raised money with, essentially what he did is the reason so many media outlets, including Adrian Wojnarowski, were mad is he essentially said, you guys are a machine. You are a rumor mill. And you feed off of news, and you need to believe that you are important in the creation of content, which is news, which you're really not. And there are other areas where reporters are very valuable. I hate to tell you this, but in sports, if you wait 5 damn seconds, you'll find out. Like, this has been something that Kevin Draper has talked about forever. Why the hell does it matter if we know at 11:55, the day before the trade deadline or the day before the free agency period starts, where Dwight Howard is going, when we're going to know the next day? Why does it matter? And, of course, people like Adrian Wojnarowski throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall, and if it hits, they're like, see, I told you. So the reason the media was so freaking mad at LeBron James is he said, I'm not going to let you control the story. I'm not going to let you control the narrative. I'm just going to say, I'm going to tell you guys at this time where to go, so everybody tuned into that instead of listening to the rumor mill. That's why they're angry. And so, that's all it's really come down to a lot. And I don't have much else to say except the people I'm mad at for super teams and the Warriors where they're at now is not really the Warriors, who, like I said, very few teams, in my opinion, are perfect teams. But on the curve, the Warriors and the Spurs are currently the only two teams I'd give like an A to. The rest of the NBA, no. And all I'll say is the Warriors are one of the few teams that was like, what if we structure our contracts in such a way that if we need money, we can spend it this year. By the way, a perfectly valid, analytic savvy team to be upset with, if you want to be in reality, is the Mavericks. Why the hell did the Mavericks do a trade that essentially let them offload Bogut? If all these teams are going to be mad at super teams, if when the Warriors come on knocking with Andrew Bogut and saying, we need to offload this contract, and that, why don't you just say, no, we're not going to offload that contract for you. You're just going to keep that $10 million. And, obviously, it might be hurting yourself if you view Bogut as an asset. I don't think he was worth the money at $10 million with how much injury he had. You could just say, no, we're not going to give you the opportunity just to get $10 million in cap space to sign someone. You keep that player. You buy him out. You do whatever.
Speaking of super teams, by the way, Dre, and I agree with all those points. Just take a look at this 76ers roster you were talking about, the 83 playoff seasons. Their top 4 win producers are Moses Malone, Maurice Cheeks, Julius Irving, and Bobby Jones. Bobby Jones was the worst of those with 9.72 produced and 13, 14, and 19 produced for the other 3. That's one heck of a super team. So, and I don't know, however the team is formed, it's great. And do you want to go to ratings right now, Dre? Because we're kind of jumping around. We have this on the script. We had the best ratings for this finals and I think the playoffs overall in years. People love watching the best players and the best teams go up against each other.
Let's talk about this for a few reasons, Brian, because it's hilarious. So one is, I've made this point before. The Milwaukee Bucks, if they improve themselves by 5 wins next season and are maybe the 5th seed in the playoffs, so 45 to 50 win team, which seems reasonable, although things like signing Matthew Dellavedova, trading for Tony Snell, they're not bad moves, but they're not moves that light me on fire. And the only reason this team really is doing as well as it is Giannis is a beast. And it's one of those where I put Giannis Antetokounmpo in the same boat as James Harden, Steph Curry, and Russell Westbrook at this point, where they're these players that had a double jump, and seeing that if you told me you believe that second jump was coming, I just look at you and say, get out of here. Right. When we had a discussion at the start of the year where I said, Giannis is easily worth the money based on his age. He's only going to get better. He's easy. This is a fantastic signing. Did I predict that he would be an MVP caliber player this season? Absolutely not. And that's the only reason the Mavericks really made the playoffs. It wasn't They didn't make bad moves, but they didn't make a ton of savvy moves to get themselves there. And then I'd argue they're definitely underplaying Greg Monroe. And okay, let's say the Bucks, where I live in Wisconsin, get to 45, 50 wins, make a few decent trades. All right. Well, the amount of ratings that is going to go up, the amount of fan reaction that's going to get is not going to be very much, in my opinion. Whereas I have told this story numerous times now, I see Warriors gear all over the place. My local sporting stores all have Warriors end caps. You can get a bunch of people who are basketball fans in Wisconsin excited about the Warriors, excited about Steph Curry, excited about Kevin Durant. And that's another big thing, right? We compare to wrestling a lot. Ironically, wrestling's rating is doing terrible. I might do a shout out. Arturo has a great thing about how wrestling needs to improve its ratings. But what I was going to say is, wrestling understands you make a superstar, and it doesn't matter if people love or hate that star. If they tune in to watch, that's good for business. And so the Warriors being as good as they are and people wanting to see if they'll win 73 games, to see if they're going to go 16-0, to see how good Kevin Durant's going to do with Steph Curry, to see if Steph Curry is going to break the all-time three-point record, right? If they want to tune in to see all this, that is a much different scenario than a local team being mediocre. That's much better for the league. You'll get much more fans. And I think we've mentioned a lot, right? You just said this, the ratings are up. TV is the future, right? The old method used to be how many butts can we cram in the stadium, but because most stadiums are constrained to 18 to 20,000 seats, and there's only so much you can charge for them, and a lot of the rich people that really like basketball are already buying, the suites, et cetera, there's only so much you're going to be able to do there. But if you make the television huge, and especially in an era where so many forms of media are binge watchable, DVRable, if you actually have a live product people want to watch, that is huge for money. So, the ratings being great is fantastic for the NBA, and a super team is great for that. And you can't even really argue that fans are getting sick, but this is the third year in a row we've seen the Warriors versus the Cavaliers. It's the exact same story, right? This is very much Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant in the 1980s for wrestling. You replay the same story over and over and over again. So that's fantastic. And I saw some people saying, well, don't be oversold on the ratings this year. You got to think about the future. Like, what are the Warriors going to be like for the future? There's another subject that's not on the script. We'll talk there, Brian. But, it's one of those where you can't really convince me that the ratings aren't an indication of how NBA fans are right now. Seeing this is the third year in a row they've seen this. That, this is, for all of the hatred about Kevin Durant hopping ship, clearly people are tuning in to watch. Yeah, super teams are great for the league. The only real problem, in my opinion, is we need more of them. The Los Angeles Clippers should have had a super team. Dear God, if the Brooklyn Nets and New York Knicks, I almost said Yankees, New York Knicks weren't so freaking stupid, a super team in New York, how great would that be? It would be great if Boston actually got off their hands and did something, got another super team in Boston again. We just need super teams in big markets. That has always been the key to the success in the NBA. And we saw it in the 80s when Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Michael Jordan basically put a super team in Los Angeles, Boston, and Chicago, three of the biggest markets. That was when the NBA was at its best.
And Philadelphia.
Philadelphia
Sixers were great in the early 80s. And not just that one team.
Houston Rockets in the 90s,
Yep.
Detroit Pistons, end of the 80s. These were all super teams in big markets. So for F's sake, NBA, let's make more super teams, not less.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
What else you got to say on the ratings, Brian? Because that's a ton there.
No, not too much. That was the main point, and just that this comes from Wages of Wins originally, right? Was one of the first times this was published, I think. So, anyway, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have there. We got a lot to go, I guess. So let's keep going.
Okay, I want to be a jerk, Brian, and so this is
Sure.
We talked this a little last week. But I looked into it a little more. And one thing that bugs me is just the certainty people have that this team is going to stick together. Something, maybe I'll spook you off a little, this seems very reminiscent of Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway. Because if people don't recall, in 1994, Shaquille O'Neal, Penny Hardaway, the Orlando Magic are fantastic. They win 60-some-odd games. They make it to the NBA Finals. It's one of the biggest upsets in NBA Finals history, if I recall. It was 94 or 95, sorry. But they make the NBA Finals. It's fantastic. And people are like, Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway, they're freaking young as heck, right? So it's like Michael Jordan's out of the league. This is the team of the future. And 2 years later, it all fell apart. Shaquille O'Neal goes to Los Angeles. Penny Hardaway gets injured and then leaves when free agency comes up. Orlando Magic fans, you guys are the worst. You scared out two amazing players that still had some good years left in them elsewhere. So the Orlando Magic was this team of the future that everybody is super hyped on, and nothing came to fruition. So the Warriors, everybody is saying is a done deal. Now, One question for you, Brian. You know better than me. Has Kevin Durant officially opted into next year? I mean, I would be shocked if he didn't. But he's for
I
those of you
don't
who don't
think
know,
so.
Kevin Durant's contract situation. He's on a 2-year deal, a 1-and-1, just like LeBron signed with Cleveland, where it's 1 year guaranteed. That was this year, 1 year player option, and then he's an unrestricted free agent after that. Now, for those of you that also don't know, the way the NBA works is if you've had a player for 3 years, you have their bird rights. Since Kevin Durant signed outright with the Warriors, I don't believe they have his bird rights.
They do not have his bird rights.
Which means this season, even this season, but if not this season, next season, he's an unrestricted free agent where the Warriors are not really able to offer him more than the field. And so there's no guarantee that he's not going to basically say, you know what, I got my title. I'm going back to OKC. He could do a LeBron, right? He could do a LeBron with Miami. Additionally, right, we've seen major fights with Draymond Green and management, which, is shocking to us, but it's the Dennis, Draymond Green is like the modern era. He's Dennis Rodman if he could shoot, but slightly worse. If you turn the dial up on offense and turn the dial down a little on defense, you turn Dennis Rodman to Draymond Green. He's this player with off the court issues that fights with management, funny personality, all of this stuff, underrated, but, makes me happy for the modern NBA where he got paid. Dennis Rodman never got the pay he deserved for how good he was. But so anyway, it's just one of these where Draymond Green gets in a fight with management and gets traded. That could very easily happen. Kevin Durant decides he doesn't want to stick around. That could happen. Steph Curry's contract is up too. Steph Curry decides he doesn't want to stick around and leaves. That could happen. Klay Thompson, they're probably not going to be able to afford him, which isn't a big, in my opinion, personally, if you've got Curry, Durant, Draymond Green, you're fine. Let's not forget, excuse me, burp on air. Very unprofessional. Apologize for that, Brian. But Andre Iguodala is older. He has amazed me how well he's played. I'm so glad he got this resurgence in his career in Golden State.
It's been the Spurs plan, Dre. He's been playing less minutes during the regular season, 20 or 30 or whatever, and then he's upped his minutes in the playoffs as now that he's older.
I was trying to think. I need a fifth person for this team, but I was going to say Manu Ginobili, Andre Iguodala, Lamar Odom, and Bill Walton in terms of, basically starters off the bench is the strategy you call it. I need like one more player for that. But God, he's been amazing in that role. And, he rightfully, I was looking over these numbers today, rightfully earned finals MVP a few years back. If you have to give it to the winning team, rightfully earned finals MVP has been fantastic. But let's not forget, he
said something
older.
Funny, if I can interrupt real fast, Dre. So he said something like, I'm paraphrasing, it's probably easy to find this quote, that it was great to have a high point scoring game. He was joking about this at the end because he's coming into free agency. And he's basically what he was trying to get across is something like he knows that the stuff he does is what wins, but he need to trick the league to increase his value by scoring more points. He made a joke about that though. So he kind of made an analytics joke. But anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, he's an unrestricted free agent next season.
Yeah.
And, it's annoying because I think he'll get underpaid again. He's a guy that I've loved and think definitely deserves the money and all that. But it's just one of these where when it comes down to it with him, he's great, but, he's turning 33 next season. He's up for a contract thing. Pretty much, I argue, get your money, right? This is the Andrew Sutton comment. To any player, get your money. If there's some team out there, Boston wants to throw a bunch of money at him because they don't know how to spend money correctly. Get your money. So there is the reason this team is amazing is 5 players. It's not going to surprise you. It's Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, missing one. Is it Klay Thompson? I don't know. Who are the top 5 players?
So Klay is worse per minute, but he plays a lot of minutes. But then McGee and Pachulia play less minutes, but are very good per minute. So it's tough to say, who's the most valuable out of those guys. David West kind of falls in that same category. They have these 3 big men that played great per minute, but didn't play a lot of minutes.
Okay, so I'm lying. There are 4 players, right? Because then one thing they've got is they've got this very deep, versatile bench. They got Klay Thompson, and I know it's funny to call Klay Thompson an off the bench player, but I'm saying they've got their core, which is Curry, Durant, Iguodala, Draymond Green. That's their super team, right?
Yeah.
And then they've got these good players, Zaza Pachulia, but he played less than 1,500 minutes. Klay Thompson, who, by the way, as we've noted, probably good on defense, so above average player, probably market value for what he does, but on this team with how many other scores they've got redundant. JaVale McGee, limited minutes, but good. David West, he is just beating Father Time. Sean Livingston is old as well. So the issue with this team is it's pretty much 4 players, which is fine. That recipe for success. But what you have to realize is 3 of these 4 players have contracts coming up. One of these 4 players has age. One of these 4 players has attitude. I always hate that, but the attitude issue thing. So it bugs me that people are as secure in the thought that this team is going to win 5, 6 titles. We even saw that with LeBron James, right? You had LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh all in their prime. You got some of the most, you got Mike Miller, you got Ray Allen, you signed all these other good players. Mario Chalmers, we really liked his numbers coming out of the draft. So it's kind of like you have this team that's young in their prime, long-term contracts, and you got 4 finals out of them. But, keeping a team good for more than 5 years is hard, especially when, money and other things come into the mix. And this team that's what bugs me. People are viewing this team as if there are no possible off the court issues, and those are the things that have always torpedoed other teams. That's always what's bugged me when we see these ratings that are like they're 99% to win the finals or 99% to do this. I've yelled at ourselves for our error margins because, like I said, I bashed Nate Silver over this because he wrote a book where he talked about this. It is not the knowables that we are worried about. It is the unknowable unknowables, and we've watched sports enough to know that it takes one ankle tweak, one falling on some sweat, one player just getting upset because it took them 2 weeks to offer them a contract instead of 1 to completely change a super team's history. And so it bugs me that people are just so confident, given that, in 30 years of NBA history, we've seen these things fall apart. Many.
Yeah, no, that's right. And, I feel like people are kind of building a case out of circumstantial evidence. I don't know if that's a good, comparison. But so in terms of the off-the-court stuff, it's being rumored that this year things were a lot better, that there were basically 2 fights the whole year for the team. And one involved Draymond Green and one didn't. And it wasn't a real fight. It was more like people trying to support each other. And I don't know. Anyway, it's being reported that things are fine in that regard. So, okay, so far so good, right? That could change, though. It's also being reported, there's verbal comments out in the media saying, yeah, verbally, we're all committing to come back to the team. And there's rumors that they're negotiating the contracts in the background. But none of it's happened yet, right? None of it's actually happened.
Verbal confirmation has never changed. LeBron, Dwayne Wade didn't opt out of a contract assuming LeBron James would be back. That's never happened in recent years. It's like, I was laughing so hard when, they had the reunion of the Celtics. And they were kind of like, we felt betrayed by Ray Allen. It's like, this guy is old. His window is shutting. If he wants to get paid and get one more title, this is the last shot. So it's like, I don't know. It's a very funny thing where we've argued this forever, and it's a rough one. But people do not remember the off the court stuff years later. They remember the history books, and your bank account does not remember the off the court stuff years later. So if it comes down to if you have a goal in the NBA to win a title, if you have a goal to get paid, then you really, really, really have to kind of ignore peer pressure, which I admit is a hard thing to do. It works in many, many fields. But it's amusing to watch how betrayed people will act when it's kind of going, we know that this is his last chance to make money. We know this is his last chance to win a title. How can you even argue you feel betrayed? And then you end up with people like Charles Barkley, who are freaking hypocrites who are on the air saying stuff, and you go, do you remember your career at all? And apparently it does not.
Well, and let me add one thing to that. So you were saying earlier that the Warriors and Spurs are the only teams that we might want to give an A grade to. And, both of us have been critical of the Warriors in the past. Well, not critical, but we've been apprehensive. And what I mean by that...
Everybody, and sorry to jump in and cut you up, but it's like, I just want to get this out there too. I find it very odd that people think if you like something, it means you're not critical. It's like, sure. When you have parents, we're seeing, we'll talk LeVar Ball maybe in a bit, but when you have a parent who's really concerned about their kid's thing or a coach, whatever, right? The way they help that person is not to lay back and let them make mistakes. It's to be extra critical. So I know it seems silly when we're yelling at the Warriors for something and saying this is a B move instead of an A move. And you go, well, who cares? It's a B move. You go, yeah, I want him to get a 4.0 GPA. I'm not looking to get a 3.0. And so then there are teams that like, we don't talk about the Nets that much. That's because we've given up on the Nets. We don't care. They suck. So just to point that out, you said we've been critical in the past. You're a Warriors fan. Jeremy Britton's one of the biggest Warriors fans. We're all Warriors fans around here. So when we're ultra critical, it doesn't mean we don't like them. It's in fact quite the contrary.
And, the tone of your criticism and the substance of it matters too. But anyway, here's my here's my past criticism of the Warriors that I wanted to bring up again. That they've made some really good moves, and they called themselves light years ahead. It was a funny meme. I even have the shirt that I wear on the show all the time that says light years ahead. But we push back against that because even though they've done well in this short period of time, they haven't done it consistently like the Spurs. So we're not sure if they're stumbling into some good moves like Portland did a few years ago and then undid it all with bad moves, or if they're actually just a great front office and they're going to keep making good moves. And the reason why I bring that up is, a couple years ago when they lost to Cleveland, they had this core minus Durant still, but the roster for the most part wasn't as good. They had these players like Spates and all these other bad players that hurt them. So this offseason, they were able to load up with all these really good players for really cheap. And that was savvy for sure, but there was some luck involved too. So are they going to get lucky and be savvy enough to reload their roster with more David West and Zaza Pachulias next season?
Like 8 years ahead, and I mean, hurts me to do this. I know there was a fight between Mark Cuban and Daryl Morey back in the day about this point too. The reality is the team that Lacob inherited, or bought, or whatever you want to call it, had Draymond Green and Steph Curry on it already. And those players have been monumental to the success. Now, to be fair, the good news is now if you start looking at the numbers, right, Iguodala plus Durant is like matching that. We've also argued that Iguodala said, I want to be on your team. Both Iguodala and Durant came up and said, I want to be on your team. And they said, we don't know if we can get you. And then they were able to maneuver things around. So, like, it's one of those where we give them credit for the maneuvering. That's like been one of our bashings of Boston. It's like, if you have the possibility for this player, don't sit on your hands, do what you can to get it. But our reason we were kind of mad at the light years ahead comment was we were going, a lot of your success is not stuff you did. And it's a little iffy for you to take that much credit. And, of course, like I said, Daryl Morey and Mark Cuban, one of the things is Mark Cuban bought a team with Dirk Nowitzki right before he took off and Steve Nash when Steve Nash was still young, and not taking anything away. And for what it's worth, Mark Cuban has run a tight ship that up until last season was doing pretty well. I think above 500 for years and years and years, making the playoffs a bunch of years. But it's kind of like if Mark Cuban 3 years in is like, I'm the best GM in the league, or not GM, owner in the league, and you're like, it's Dirk Nowitzki and Steve Nash, and they were on the squad when you got them. Wait a bit, right? And then a decade later, if he wants to do it, we're like, absolutely. Yes, you lost Steve Nash, you reloaded. Yeah, Dirk Nowitzki's getting older, you've reloaded. Fine. So that's really our only point here. And by the way, let's give some credit. The light years ahead, I'm gonna take a back step because I was thinking about another metaphor, Brian. I was thinking about Titanic. Do you remember this? James Cameron, when Titanic, I believe, won Best Picture, went up to accept the award and said, I'm king of the world, and everybody bashed him for it. Got a lot of hate for that. And I was thinking about it. I was like, at that point, Titanic was the first movie to gross over $1 billion. And it, I don't remember how many Oscars it won. And probably stupid the Oscars are done, but whatever. It crushed the Oscars. And then I remember, this was back in the day of Blockbuster. I remember, like, it crushed video sales. And you have this person that was responsible for this movie getting up on a stage where a bunch of people are surrounded to honor people that have done well with movies, say that, and they're like, how egotistical. And I was like, I thought about that the other day. I was thinking about that to myself. I don't know why it came up. And I was like, really? I was like, really? Actually, I'm like, you have an award ceremony where the entire purpose of this is, we've used the term circle jerk before. You all just sit around to say how great you are. And you have the most successful movie ever. Past the Dave Barry. That's like been his argument, right? Should the Oscar for Best Picture go to the Avengers?
The Avengers theory of the Oscars, yeah.
Yeah, it wins Best Picture. And then, of course, it wins all the awards. It's like, and you're mad that he is bragging about that, and it's like, and it's very. I was like thinking about this, gag me. It's like, how hypocritical. And so it's the same thing here, where Lacob's got the team that has broken the record for most regular season wins, has now broken the record for win percentage in the playoffs, back-to-back MVPs, back-to-back or 2 out of 3 finals, right? And people are like, he's bragging about being light years ahead, and I was like, why not? And the only constraint we'll get back is like, be careful about how much of that you think is you, and stay on your toes.
And I'll give him a little more credit too. And, I stand by what I said before, but just to look at the other side of this. So I haven't read this article in a while. It's a little bit old now, but I don't think he was just saying, in terms of our front office evaluating talent, we're light years ahead of the NBA. I think what he meant was, in terms of our whole organization, we've got all these catapult wearables to decide, to have fatigue. Steph Curry has his special training program, where he's dribbling all those balls and everything. I don't know if you've seen those videos. They have all kinds of different stuff like that. They have an analytics department they didn't used to before. All teams do now, I'm assuming, but who knows what those are built like, So I think he's talking about all this off the court stuff combined. This businessy stuff maybe helps put them light years ahead too. So,
and I think actually, yeah, if you do, we've talked this a lot as the sum of the parts, and our only real report is just be aware that if you're making a bar, I was going to say bar chart, pie chart of it, be aware the biggest slice is currently Durant and not Durant, although it is now, Jesus, is Curry and Draymond, and now now other things. But I mean, that's the funny part too, is everybody knows you want Durant in the offseason. And it's one of the few teams that said, you know what? We're going to put ourselves in a position to do that because there were other good teams that didn't or wasted their money. And the Lakers, for what it's worth, they had the salary cap, maybe. But if I was Durant, I was like, you just signed Luol Deng and Timofey Mozgov. Good. Good job. But I'm going to go look at this other team. So, in that regard, sure. And I think our only, like I said, when you love something, you can get very very critical, and this has happened a lot, by the way. A lot of commenters, the Boxscore Geeks. Some of my favorites are like if we have a code bug. I know one that we haven't fixed yet. I don't think, unless Patrick has. It's like there's a Mike Dunleavy and a Mike Dunleavy Jr. There is a commenter. I'm not calling you out as bad for this. I'm actually thanking you, but just saying it's like there's a bug in your code. You really need to fix this. And I had one year where there was a bug in the position adjustment that was there for like a month, and they're like, this is unacceptable. And I actually was like, I get it. You love wins produced. You love the Boxscore Geeks. You love all the stuff we've done, but realize we're doing this as a hobby, and when other stuff comes up, just stuff goes on the back burner. And at the same point, like, we don't own the Warriors. We're not the GMs of the Warriors. So even if we get mad and angry, they didn't trade for Kevin Love, which has turned out fine, right? By the way, pretty much we had this argument, right? Like last season, we were saying Kevin Love plus Kevin Durant plus Zaza Pachulia plus David West for Andrew Bogut and Harrison Barnes. If that trade ever came up on NBA 2K, like the game would light on fire and say, fine, if you want to play in easy mode.
I don't know, obviously, though. Green, Durant, Love, that'd be a great front line. But your point is definitely right, though.
Your choice was Kevin Love or Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant. I'm sorry. I'll agree. I'll be like, yeah, you're right, Kevin Durant. Yeah. And also, Kevin Love's been getting beat up and he's older. So, yeah, I have, at this point, I agree with that.
Well, do you want to talk about the actual games now, or
not go on this? Okay. You do. Like I said, I thought it was ridiculous. Oh, okay. So here's a stat. I told this to Jeremy Britt, another big Warriors fan, but I thought you would enjoy it. So I'm going to give you, a Golden State Warriors fan, a stat that you are going to get to use and love, and it's going to inflate your stupid egos even more, as if Golden State Warriors fans don't do. So by the numbers, this is LeBron James's best NBA Finals.
Yeah.
He had a 300 wins produced, a little above it, but I'll say 300. 300 wins produced, and produced for his team 1.35 wins. Remarkable. His best NBA Finals in his career. He's been to, 8 of them now? All right. Here's the fun note. If you look at performance and wins produced for the NBA Finals, he actually places third in permanent performance behind Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. Kevin Durant and Steph Curry both outperformed LeBron James per minute in this NBA Finals. And Steph Curry is like neck and neck in terms of total wins, and a large part of that, I believe, is he played fewer minutes. Yeah,
so Ian Levy on Nylon Calculus went into this today a little bit. He's always been one of our favorite writers. And so the headline here is the Cavaliers did flip the switch in the playoffs. And he goes on to say how their O rating went way up. Their D rating stayed the same. However, considering how good the teams are in the playoffs, that's kind of a victory as well. But then he goes on to talk about the Warriors too, and I'll read this final sentence here. He says, let's see. I will admit to being skeptical about Cleveland's ability to hit another gear in the playoffs, but they absolutely did. Unfortunately, Golden State did as well. So, yeah, he agrees with what you were just saying.
To be fair, and this is an annoying. I'm going to give a huge props to Ian Levy for this post, which I hate to use the term smell test because I bash basketball on paper for using it all the time. But here is a fantastic point about this post. Not too long. It's got a chart and 2 graphs, and that is always one of my litmus tests for reading articles on advanced analytics in sports. I read an article today, and I actually really like the writer, so I don't want to say too much more about it. So I really like the writer, but I read it and it was so many words, and this used to be one of those things that I would say about Zach Lowe. I was like, dear God, you wrote an encyclopedia. And so articles that have a lot of words or a lot of YouTube clips, but not a lot of graphs or stats, I hate. So this Ian Levy post I absolutely love because it's got two great charts that are awesome. And basically, yeah, the Warriors or the Cavs, sorry, killing me, Ian, making me sad, reminding me of the '09 Nuggets. So the previous best was the '09 Nuggets that just couldn't two inbound passes, freaking Lakers. Luckily we don't have Chris Yeh, the thing, because I'd probably cut him off. I'd kick him off the point. But no, fantastic point. But I mean, we looked at one thing, and this came up, right? Tyronn Lue joked about it a bit. LeBron James played like 44 plus minutes a game. The switch in the playoffs was really LeBron James saying, yeah, you're going to play me every freaking minute you can. And I'm not a huge fan of on-off statistics for obvious reasons, but the funny one is the on-off statistics of how much the Cavaliers with LeBron James on the court with him off was just huge. And that made me laugh. And it's one of those where the numbers do back it, right? LeBron James compared to the rest of his team, right? You take Kevin Durant off of the Warriors this offseason, and that happened the first round, right? You still got Steph Curry playing great. You still got Andre Iguodala playing great. You still got how am I dropping another couple names? But you still got some other players playing great. If LeBron James had gotten back spasms against the Celtics, the entire playoffs is different. So, yeah, I mean the switch that the Cavaliers were able to flip was LeBron James playing more minutes. Even with that switch, the Warriors were still light years ahead of them, and this is true, right? If you compare by the way, you want another fun stat about the finals, Brian?
Light years ahead. This
is the worst team to lose in the NBA Finals since the 1999 New York Knicks.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before. So we thought the Celtics were not going to be as good this year, as they turned out to be. And they finished first place, and we bet the under. Patrick did in our portfolio.
It was a push.
And it was a push. We bet the under, and they got the number 1 seed, and we pushed it.
And it all came down. Yeah, it all came down to the last day. So that is definitely hilarious. And then of course, yeah. I mean, and by the way, just goes
to show you, by the way, that the Cavaliers were so overmatched by the Warriors. The fact that they played as well as they did, especially LeBron, like that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, what's amazing to me about LeBron is in the last 3 years he has 7 wins against the Warriors in the finals out of 3 matchups. Right, the final tally is
it was 4-2 the first year. That sounds right.
It's 11 to 7, right? That's the win-loss. That's like 3 to 4 more wins at minimum than he should have when you compare the difference. And it is LeBron, right? That's what's remarkable to me. So
yeah, I wonder how many of those wins he was responsible for alone. Probably a lot of them, more than half.
This fits right in here. Nick Guarino, not a huge fan of the ELO rating, but whatever, has crunched the numbers and looked at basically how outmatched teams were in the finals, and then what was the pre-series narrative and then what actually happened, and basically noted that Michael Jordan was favored in every single finals except 1998. In 1998, it was a toss-up between them and the Jazz. But in 5 out of 6 NBA finals that Michael Jordan went to, his team was the favorite and they won. And then against the Jazz, they were the slight favorite and they won. And to be fair, like Michael Jordan had some bad games, whatever. LeBron James has only been favored in 1 series. That was the 2013 series against the Spurs. It was a toss-up against the Mavericks when they choked. And then he's been an underdog, not an underjob, all of the other years. So, and by the way, like when they won in 2015, I want to say against the Spurs, is that right? Was it 2014? It was 2014. Sorry.
Yes, 2014.
Or they lost, right? They lost in when they lost. Yeah, it was like he had 2 major. Actually, so here's my problem. They may have been favored, but in 2013, the Spurs, according to the numbers, were a better team. So I'm just pointing out that essentially LeBron James has always been on the losing side going into the finals. Michael Jordan was always on the better. And then it's when I actually had a tweet that got some love where I pointed out, if everybody wants to basically compare LeBron James to Michael Jordan while simultaneously bashing the Warriors, there was a point in NBA history where people were arguing that Michael Jordan and the Bulls were bad for the NBA because they were just, they were light years ahead of the rest of the NBA. So it's funny how fans pretty much don't make up their mind. I think they just want to hate.
Yeah, and just for some more context here, this did start as a question that you kind of brought up on Twitter, which is Jordan had much better teammates than LeBron, basically, right? That's why he was able to win more titles. And my favorite thing about this Nick Warino spreadsheet that we're showing right now is these columns on the right. The pre-series narrative versus the post-series narrative. I don't know how scientific this is, if he read a bunch of articles or whatever, but the fact that you see so many pre-series narratives of LeBron underdog and so many post-series narratives of LeBron choke for the same year, it doesn't surprise me. That's funny.
That was hilarious the first year they lost, where, they lost 4-2 and we're like, they're making mistakes. And it's like, they're not supposed to be here. So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to say, do you have anything else you want to talk about? I might talk a little bit about Kyrie Irving, and then that can be our show.
Let's see all this stuff. So best team of all time is a big one. People are talking about that a lot. We covered the Neil Payne article, so I think that that kind of covers that, right?
Sure, that's the discussion. I mean, I would put them. You got to look at. So here's what gets interesting. So, for instance, the Bulls, if you consider 1991 to 1998. I really consider those two different teams, right? Because the only players that held over were Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Yes, they were great, but the rest of the, Horace Grant, one of the biggest underrated players of all time. Same with Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr. They're all these great players. So I consider those two different kind of franchises, if you're going to use the term. Showtime Lakers, right? Those are probably consistent, right? If you consider the Showtime Lakers from maybe 1980 to 1988, that's really strong. The Celtics, same period, right? 1980, 1988. Those are great. The Spurs definitely in the 2000s, and if we're doing the stupid thing where you require they win a title, the Lakers certainly from 2000 to 2004 or whatever. So, I mean, most of the best teams ever pretty much only lasted about 3 to 5 seasons. The Heat as well, right? So at this point, they're up there and they're not done. So I think they belong in the discussion, and I've kind of made this argument about greats before, where we get in discussions like, who's better, Carmelo Anthony or LeBron James? And I look and I go, this is a stupid question. There is no confidence interval you could set this to where that's a question. Get out of here. But you go, who's better, Kevin Garnett or Ben Wallace? Your numbers say Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace better than Kevin Garnett. And I go,
Garnett's pretty good.
They're both stars, and Kevin Garnett's more versatile. And is one getting more credit? Is one getting more,
As far as dynasties go, they haven't done enough yet, obviously. Now, in terms of...
Are you kidding me? No. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like, first off, I throw out a lot of the pre-'80s dynasties for a lot of reasons. The 60s Celtics, I'm sorry, there were 8 teams in the league and no free agency. Sorry. And you even there was a very interesting switch. This was in Dr. J's biography, where he talked about how when he came to the 76ers, like, the coach had more control. Like, Dr. J got in a fight with his coach about how they were running the offense. And for a while, people sided with the coach. People don't remember this. I forget the coach's name, but Magic Johnson got his coach fired and was vilified at the time for it. And that has completely changed, right? Obviously, it's a joke now, Coach LeBron.
Was it Paul Westhead that got fired, maybe? I can't remember.
I believe that's the case. Anyway. But here's what I was just going to say about that. Like, in the 60s, there was a finals that the Celtics won because, I forget who it was, the Lakers coach benched Wilt Chamberlain in Game 7 and put him back in the... So, it was a much different era, much different league, all this other stuff. I'm saying if you look at modern dynasties, I'll put that in quotes, most of their windows are 3 to 5 years. And we know this because that is the lifespan of most players' careers. And, the contracts, as we mentioned, contracts get different. People go elsewhere for other reasons. So at this point, I'd put them up there. I'd put them in my top 10.
Well, so I was going to say about they're not clearly the best dynasties. They're just not way above everyone else, right? Like, they haven't won 5 in a row or something. I'd say they're kind of amongst those other teams. And I'd say for single season, it's a similar argument too, right? They finished 4th all time in SRS, one of only 4 teams to do it. But maybe those, even the Bulls who are 20 years behind, maybe that was a slightly different era. So maybe it's a little bit cut for competition now. So I say by any of those measures, it's close. I don't think they're significantly ahead.
They're not light years. They're in the discussion. And I mean, here's like the give you right now. I would probably argue the 1980 Showtime Lakers kind of win the Stockton Award. Stockton, by our numbers, is the best wins producer of all time career-wise, and that's because he was playing great. He played great from like 21 to 40, which is nuts, right? Even Kareem Abdul-Jabbar faded in his twilight, right? He was not a good player when he was in his late 30s. John Stockton, whatever was in the air, water in Utah, played great into his 40s. That's nuts. So Stockton wins the longevity, right? He had the best career all time. And, you could probably argue for like Bricado Prime in terms of well-roundedness. You might give it to Magic. You might give it to MJ.
Bricado Prime looking at their best 6 years non-consecutive, right?
Yes, best 6 years non-consecutive, and then maybe sprinkling on a little subjectivity. Because, for instance, Dennis Rodman, for instance, like his best 6 years are like the best, but you're like his game's very one-sided. So like Michael Jordan's 1989 is one of the best seasons ever especially when you factor in both sides of the court. So like, you could probably argue like Magic or MJ best Bricado Prime. Then John Stockton best full career. You could probably argue Showtime's Lakers best dynasty career. You could probably argue the 1995 through 1998 Bulls best kind of Bricado Prime. And, the Warriors are in the discussion, though, is all I can say. And certainly if they stay together 3 more years, they'll be in the discussion for both of those, in my opinion. So it's one of those where I think I agree. Best of all time, they're in the discussion. And I've kind of said this before, where I don't have complaints comparing a great player to a great player and going back and forth. Magic versus MJ. I say Magic, you say MJ. Both of us come away and shrug our shoulders. It's where you do the like Kobe versus MJ, Kobe versus Magic. I'm like, get out of here.
Yeah, and I'm showing some of the most dank memes right now from the finals. There's some good crying Jordans, some good others. We'll link those. Kind of my last thing on the finals was Steve Kerr won his second title as a coach, and he's won 5 as a player. And he actually mentioned that, I think, in the post game. He said that he's won that many. It was kind of a slight brag, but well deserved, right? He's got to be a Hall of Famer at this point. Not maybe for his playing career alone, but now that he's done this as a coach already, I think he's an easy Hall of Famer now.
You're getting me on a tangent, but let's take a look. So let's go to the Boxscore Geeks Tools tab.
Oh, you want to look at his playing career? All right, let's go.
Let's take a quick look. All right, so Kerr. No, not Kerry Kittles, not the player I want to look up. Funny. Okay, so Steve Kerr. Career. Boxscoregeeks.com. All right, so as a player, no. Obviously. Wins produced 43.6, which is good, but that's nothing special.
Yeah, he had a good prime, but his prime wasn't very long, right?
Well, here's the thing. There's no way his prime was even good enough because there are some players, Tracy McGrady is a player that I'm like, really, first ballot? But even Tracy McGrady's prime, right? Tracy McGrady put up more than 50 wins in his prime. Steve Kerr had 2 good years, and this was, by the way, this is where I hate to bash him, with the shortened 3. So as a player...
Oh, interesting.
By the way, it's a common argument. For instance, who am I thinking of? Rockies first baseman. How am I already forgetting his name? It's going to drive me nuts.
Oh, Andres Galarraga, the Big Cat?
Oh, no, Big Cat, of course, an MVP. Final.
Todd Helton, former Tennessee quarterback.
But Todd Helton, basically, if you look at his numbers, the only season he really put up like Hall of Fame numbers was during the steroid era. So I'm going to say the same thing here. The only year Steve Kerr even put up numbers that would consider me putting him in the Hall of Fame is with a shortened 3-point line. So as a player, no. As a player coach, sure, why not?
So he needs maybe another title or 2 as a coach. That's fair.
Sure.
That's fair.
Yeah, he'll make it in as a coach. Why not?
It's thought that he is going to coach again for sure next year. His health willing, that he's actually, it's good now. It's good enough to do it. So that's one good thing. That didn't come out very well, but you know what I mean, Dre. He's healthy again.
All right. So the last point I'm just going to make, this is an article idea that, like I said, I got 2 in the weeds. But the title is, so I'll probably ruin the chance that I'll ever release it, but it's called, Is Kyrie Irving the Next Kobe Bryant? Boom. All right. Point being, I got a little flack. So Snotty Drippin', he's a very interesting friend of me on Twitter because he likes some of my takes and hates some of them. Whenever he retweets me, I get a bunch of new followers. And then also sometimes I get a bunch of hate. So what I did is in 2015, I argued that Matthew Dellavedova was a better fit for the Cavaliers than Kyrie Irving. And people go, oh, that didn't really age well. And I go, really? The point I'll say I'm wrong on was, sure, Matthew Dellavedova did not pan out. Matthew Dellavedova was an above-average rookie that I thought was going to be a cheap role player that would work within the Cavaliers, and you could turn Kyrie Irving into something, right? You could turn him into, you already have Tristan Thompson, LeBron James, and Kevin Love. Get an Andre Iguodala-like player. You don't need a Kyrie Irving. But then, what happens? Dellavedova doesn't really pan out, and then he gets a huge payday because of the finals. The Bucks way overpay for him. Godspeed. LeBron James even was like, congratulations, because, I think they were like $9 million a year. Okay. for a below average player who, didn't really ramp up like I'd expect. And he did not play well for the Bucks this season. But Kyrie Irving, if we look at his numbers, has basically, we always say, has been a good, not great player. And I've got a few caveats. The first is, if you look at the age curve and where he is, he's like 25 years old. Arguably, there's still time for him to improve and hit that peak. And I would argue that there was definitely an injury hit. So in 2015, his wins per 48 is like 163, which is good, not great. And just another thing I'm going to throw out there, I've heard people argue he's a shooting guard. I'm sorry. He might be a star player if he was played as a shooting guard. This actually brings me back to the Kobe Bryant point. He's not. If you look at his possessions, he uses 80 touches a game. He holds the ball. He's a ball hog. Now, the funny thing when we talk about Kobe as a ball hog is the reason we thought Kobe was a ball hog is if you look at Kobe Bryant's career true shooting is like 55%. And he played on teams with Shaquille O'Neal and Pau Gasol and Lamar Odom and Robert Horry and all these players that could shoot really well. And we basically said he takes more shots than he should given how good he is at it. And the thing with Kyrie Irving is he holds the ball way too much for the type of, he's on teams next to LeBron James, who's a great distributor. He's on teams next to great players like Kevin Love, who's a great distributor. He's holding the ball too much. So he's a ball hog, not in the sense that he shouldn't shoot because his shooting numbers are quite good. He's a ball hog in the sense that he holds the ball. Now, that might not be his fault. That might be a coaching strategy. But again, we can't judge. All we can say is that Kyrie Irving is a player with the role he's played in, with the numbers he's putting up, is hogging the ball too much and getting too much credit for other players. Basically, a lot of the reason people call Kobe Bryant a greatest all-time player is because he has 5 rings. Well, shocker, 3 of those rings are next to Shaquille O'Neal at his most dominant. Don't forget that in 2000 run, Shaquille O'Neal won the Triple Crown. He won the Finals MVP, the All-Star MVP, the regular season MVP. And it is a travesty for what it's worth that Kobe Bryant has more all-defense teams than Shaquille O'Neal. I've always said this, there is a weird hatred of big men in the NBA, right? They think Shaquille O'Neal's a 7-foot behemoth. He's supposed to be able to do this. Kobe Bryant's 6'6". He's not supposed to be able to do it. So Kobe Bryant's more impressive, so he's better. I'm sorry, the way the rules work, right? If you have a 7-footer that can shoot 60 to 70% next to the rim, that's going to win you games. You don't get points for style. So just my entire point on that and the Kyrie Irving is I looked at that and was like, people were like, this didn't age well because Kyrie Irving he's got, I've called it before, the LaMarcus Aldridge principle. Kyrie Irving has some great games. And a big meme I was seeing going around is Kyrie Irving in series deciding games has these great numbers, right? 32 points per game and X and X and X. And I was like, well, yeah, but if you look at this year's playoffs, the first 3 games that got him into that hole, he played horribly. Before that 4th game, he was a below average player. So if your argument is Kyrie Irving plays great in elimination games, but you ignore the games that got them to the brink of elimination, you're doing it wrong. And that's been the entire case. I looked at Kyrie Irving's playoffs, and he's had up and downs. He's had some great playoff series. He's had some below average ones. So just in terms of the Kobe, like he is actually the perfect moniker for the next Kobe because people are going to say, are you kidding? He's made 3 finals in a row. He won a final, that killer clutch 3-point shot that buried the Warriors in 2016. All of this stuff. He's a great player. And basically I'm going, he played next to the most dominant player of his era. And that player took him to 3 finals. And he holds the ball too much for his team. He's a good, not great player. Sorry. I mean, Kyrie Irving is the next Kobe Bryant. It's remarkable. I was looking at players like DeRozan, but shocked to say, Kyrie Irving earns my moniker of the next LeBron, or not next LeBron James, just next Kobe Bryant.
He doesn't know his role. The Rock would be disappointed.
Well, okay, actually, so here's the other funny point. I hadn't even, like I said, the article got too bloated because I was going to put this point as well. What do you mean doesn't know his role? There's a fantastic Jason Kidd quote that I'll never be able to track down at this point because it's too many years in the past. But someone asked him, like, who's going to take the shot? And he shrugged and said, anybody? Because he was basically acknowledging anybody in the NBA understands that you take the shot if you have it.
That's a great quote. I've never heard that.
Mind that Kyrie Irving holds the ball 80 touches a game. Why wouldn't you? In the NBA, if you are allowed to get touches, take the damn touches because that's how you get paid. Kyrie Irving, it's the exact same thing as Kobe Bryant, right? Kobe Bryant might know in his heart of hearts, he might not, but he might know in his heart of hearts that he's nowhere close to MJ. But if everybody's saying you're the next MJ, and that means millions of dollars in marketing and salary, I mean, how overpaid did he get on his last contract? You don't shut them down. So the same thing. If Kyrie Irving's on a team and they say, take the ball, and he goes, listen, I think we could win 5 to 10 more games a year, which wouldn't mean jack going up to the finals and probably wouldn't mean jack in the finals, but I could give up 5 to 10 touches a game and give them to Kevin Love, and I'll look worse, right? My points per game will go down, but it'll help us win. But that means come next salary negotiation, I might get paid less. Why would he? I have no complaints about Russell Westbrook and Kyrie Irving taking every possession, every shot they can. It's just important when we are looking at them as fans and trying to say how great they are, that we acknowledge that they're playing a different game, right? They're playing the get credit and get paid game, whereas the nerds like us are looking at the what wins games game. All right. That's all I got there. Anything to add, Brian?
No, that was perfect.
All right. Well, we've easily hit an hour. So let's see. I'll let you get any. I have no soft landing, but pretty much, yeah. There was so much to talk about, and you let me ramble, so I appreciate that. I Kyrie Irving this podcast, Brian, as I usually do. So thank you for that. Any shout outs you want to give? Last thoughts? I've got one shout out. Well, we both have the same shout out to Patrick, and that'll be our show.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, shout outs to you and Patrick and Andrew and all of our great guests and just everyone who is part of the show this season, all the commenters and everyone else. It was a really fun season again, and we'll keep going in the off season. We'll do more draft stuff. And I've got a couple of shout outs here. Actually, I'll let you take Patrick's shout out. So
Patrick, make the show this week. Obviously any week that the finals are going on and there might be a game. So he passed along a fantastic Foot Locker ad, which is amazing. And Lonzo Ball is in it. And it's just great where Lonzo Ball easily pokes fun because it's a special Father's Day gift. I'll let you watch it, but Lonzo Ball definitely pokes at LeVar Ball. It's great. Patrick passed it along and said, if anybody's thinking there's an attitude problem with Lonzo, this ad should at least alleviate some of that. And our argument, by the way, we were talking this pre-show, Brian, I don't think got on the show, was basically in the 24-hour media news cycle that has produced horrible things like our current election system. It's the same in the NBA, right? Where you have to wait 2 weeks before the draft or 3 weeks before the draft, and you have to say something. And it's very boring to say, Lonzo Ball looks like he's going to the Lakers. Lonzo Ball wants to go to the Lakers. Lonzo Ball worked out for the Lakers. Lonzo Ball is drafted by the Lakers. That's boring. You have to have spin. And then Chris Ye noted that Lonzo Ball is kind of one of the first big stories the Lakers have had. So it's kind of very clickbaity, right? You say something controversial about Lonzo Ball, it gets lots of views. It gets people discussing things on Twitter. You say another thing. And so it's very self-perpetuating, self-feeding. And so our kind of thought is, it might happen, but Chris Ye wasn't swayed. We're not swayed, and this ad should definitely alleviate some fears from some people. And by the way, same note, Foot Locker has made some fantastic ads about basketball. I love their ads. All right,
smart move by Lonzo, LeVar, and their management to realize that situation and put this good PR out there too. But like Chris said, he's probably just going to the Lakers anyway. And then my shout out was there's a article in Business Insider and maybe some other places about a Microsoft robot that got the highest all-time score in Ms. Pac-Man, a perfect score, which has never been done by any human or AI before. And there's some cool stuff about it in here. So yeah, check that out. Good nerd video game stuff on that.
It's definitely cool because, it harkens back to my graduate school studies. I've got the classic AI book on my shelf. But this is fun stuff. And, I was joking with you pre-show that, I did stuff like this, but in grad school when I did it, it was like tic-tac-toe based on how you were explaining how it had learned. And I'd kind of done that. And I was saying just how cool it's gotten where in modern day, computing power has gotten so cheap and parallelizing tasks has gotten so cheap. That used to be like the one winning thing humans had against computers was computers were serial, right? They had to do things in order. And our brain is built to do a lot of things in parallel, right? I'm seeing, I'm talking, I'm listening, I'm moving my hands, I'm smelling the air. If there's a sound over there, I'll react immediately. I do lots of stuff in parallel in my brain. Computers are catching up. So, basically, Brian, the saving grace is humans might be tanking ourselves. We look at politics and that. I'm sorry I'm so dire, but if you're a brown person,
it was a really weird day today, Dre. A lot of weird stuff happened. So.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to touch on it because it would get, I don't mind that it would get political. That's the one thing. I do not mind gun violence being politicized in the United States. It is freaking ridiculous not to say it should be a political issue. In fact, I hate the term that political correctness applies to stand-up comedy, but not politics, and that people saying you're just politicizing that event. I'm like, yeah, that's your freaking job as politicians. You're supposed to make policies that relate to things that affect us. So I do not mind that, but I didn't want to get down that rabbit hole. It's not that we couldn't have talked. It's not that I didn't want to talk it. It's that I think you come here for basketball. I come here for basketball. Brian want to talk basketball. But I was going to say, humans, the news cycle, all this stuff that we were just talking about might be getting us worse and worse and worse. But hey, maybe Skynet's not far off. And, it's funny in all these movies like The Animatrix, The Matrix, even Terminator. I don't know if I'm that against the computers with the exclusion of in Terminator, their strategies are really stupid. For them being AI and having as much control as they do, their strategies really suck.
AlphaGo would kick Skynet's ass, Dre, in a game of Go or world domination, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the real villains of the Terminator movies are the programs that program the initial Skynet. I mean, it's just stupid. I think a modern AI would be a much better Skynet. All right, well, anyway, that's been our show. If you've met us not through the website, we are at boxscoregeeks.com. You can find us on Stitcher and iTunes, the Boxscore Geeks Show. Subscribe, upvote, helps us out. We go live every week, twitch.tv/nerd numbers. In theory, if I write an article, I'll announce when we're going live so you can watch us live. I did not do that this week, even though I promised that last week. It's been that kind of year, man, Brian. It has been that kind of year for me. I've done the opposite of under promise, over deliver. I've over promised, under delivered, is what it is. And then finally, if you missed the live show, you can check us out on Channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. I've been your host, Dre Alvarez, aka Nerd Numbers, produced as always by Brian Foster. You can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian, and as always, not with us here in ethereal form, but with us in spirit, co-host Patrick Minton, who you can find on Twitter as NBA Geek. That's been our show, and we will see you next time.